If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Delphi Murders Case Series. This is episode 33, Puzzle Pieces. We are going to examine certain pieces of the puzzle that just do not fit in the context of the timeline and the official narratives. We're going to be looking back at some early information and early statements of law enforcement, and we're also going to be re-examining the latest Kelsey German interview at CrimeCon 2022 for little tidbits of information and attempts to kind of gain a more complete picture of the role social media played in these crimes and the bigger issue of people writing things off which they have no clue about and kind of building a house of cards in the wrong direction, not just in this case, but in a lot of true crime cases, because, so-called true crime aficionados, logic does not seem to be at the forefront here, which is, of course, why Mindshock exists. If you enjoy the Mindshock podcast, find it interesting and informative, and want to help support Mindshock, help us get more mind-shocking content out there, and keep up awareness, not just in this unsolved case, but in other unsolved cases, missing persons cases, wrongful convictions, and others. You can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So let's get right to it. I'm actually going to address the Kelsey German interview first. So on the Libby and Abbott subreddit, there was a pretty good write-up here highlighting some of the points regarding the Kelsey German interview at CrimeCon. And this was also posted on thesun.com. Kelsey German, 22, admitted to The Sun that she felt betrayed after it emerged that a fake social media profile was one of the last to communicate with her sister. The forensic psychology student was so furious that when she found out, she went to Libby's grave and screamed at her, she told The Sun. Libby, 14, and her friend Abby Williams, 13, were found murdered on the Delphi Historic Trails in Indiana on February 14, 2017. The case remains unsolved, but cops revealed last December that they were investigating the fake Anthony Shots social media profile created by Keegan Kline in connection with the case. The 27-year-old, who is currently in jail awaiting trial over child sex abuse allegations, has not been charged over the Delphi murders and denies any involvement. And according to the transcripts, whoever was using the Anthony Shots account was supposed to meet Libby and Abby on the trails where they were killed. It left Libby's family, who had previously been skeptical of claims that social media played a role in the killings, in deep shock. Speaking at the CrimeCon True Crime Convention in Las Vegas, Kelsey told The Sun, "I was heartbroken because Libby was my best friend and she told me everything I thought. I had to come to terms with the fact that this is something she kept from me. It was something she didn't want me to know because she knew what my opinion would be. She knew that I would tell her it's not safe and I would tell her not to do it. So she didn't tell me and I never had any clue. I never had any idea. She kept it hidden really well from all of us." Kelsey, who is due to graduate in forensic psychology at Purdue University in 2 weeks, has been one of the biggest advocates for her sister and Abby since they died. She was among the last people to see the girls alive after driving them to the trails where they were killed, allegedly. Describing her emotions when she found out that Libby had kept the online chats secret from her, Kelsey said, quote, "In the beginning, I was super angry when they first released it, and law enforcement officially told us they think it's social media and that's what they're looking at. I was so mad I went to her grave and yelled at her. I screamed. I was so angry and I still am. I'm frustrated. I write her a letter every day, and in my last few letters since December, it has not been very nice words to her. I tell her how angry and mad I am. But also on the other side, I'm so sad that she felt she couldn't tell me, that she couldn't trust me with that information. She was my best friend." End quote. Asked if she had felt betrayed by her murdered sister, Kelsey said, quote, "I do think it is that partly. I just felt like I had this image of our friendship and our sisterhood, and I do still think that's all real. I do think she was my best friend and we were really close, and I think this was just something she knew she wanted to do. And she didn't tell me. She knew that I wouldn't be okay with it, so she knew I would be upset. I think she would have been very angry with me if I told her not to do it. I don't think she would want to hear me say stop," end quote. Kelsey had previously told The Sun that before dropping her sister off the Delphi trails, she told her that she loved her, and the young teen said it back. Now she says she's grieving not only her sister's death, but the idea that she had of their friendship. She said, quote, "There's a lot of sadness and a lot of tears and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration, all of the emotions because I'm grieving what I thought was a friendship. I thought we trusted each other so much that we could share everything together, and she didn't. It might have just been that one thing she never told me, but if a friend that was here did that, there would still be a lot of hurt, and it would be something we'd need to talk about. And we can't do that, so I have to work through the anger and sadness on my own," end quote. Kelsey, who is due to get married later this year, also revealed that she has relied on therapy and church to come to terms with her anger and grief. She said, quote, "I do therapy once a week. I actually quit going and then started going again in December shortly after the Anthony Shots profile was released because I was in a really bad place. I remember the first day I sat with my therapist, she asked what my emotions were about all this, and as I was talking, she said I sounded really angry. She told me I have to work through this, and shortly after I started going to church and talking to my pastor, and that helped a lot. I was able to pray about it and get some biblical help to get through it. All of that together has brought me to a place where I'm not as angry, I'm not as sad, but definitely I still have moments of frustration," end quote. Okay, so okay, but the main takeaway here, and this is something again, a lot of so-called true crime aficionados, they just take at face value whatever law enforcement or family members might say, but the case is not solved. So it's really weird how so many of these people hallucinate that these details can be known at this time, or that law enforcement would ever withhold information. So when there were those early rumors and reports that it was definitely some kind of online communication, there were a lot of goofs out there that simply wrote that off and, oh, those are just rumors. There's nothing to do with online. There was no online communication. It was just some random psycho that saw them at the trails. It was just weird how a lot of these goofs don't understand that unsolved cases are unsolved for a reason. There's missing information, and law enforcement doesn't always share the information, even with the family. So in a lot of cases, you see this in the Maura Murray case, you see this in a lot of cases, there's a lot of people that just take on blind faith as gospel from the family, as if, and this is not to chastise the families anyway, because they might not know. They might be 100% honest in their statements, but they might not know because law enforcement didn't tell them. And this is a perfect example here. Again, if we take Libby's words at face value here, I'm not alleging she's lying or not lying, but I'm just assuming what she's saying is true here and she didn't know. So law enforcement didn't tell her. And when the family makes statements, because again, with limited information, you have a lot of these goofs that just take it on blind faith. And not only that, that's fine. Everybody's entitled to do that. But they go off and start chastising all of these honest, objective, neutral investigators who are looking at each avenue and theorizing in each avenue, and they go attack and chastise them for going down rabbit holes like the social media connections and the catfish theory. You don't have to go that far back on social media to see all these goofs trying to downplay any possible social media catfish connection and just write it off and attack people that are just examining that theory, that avenue. Because if you're doing a logical, objective, neutral, honest investigation, you're not going to close off avenues with limited information. And then this always happens in cases, you have coincidence theorists, conspiracy theorists, after the fact, when law enforcement either releases something or when the case is solved, oh, look, it turned out that some of these theories that were downplayed by the goofs who just took on blind faith whatever they saw in the idiot box and couldn't think outside the idiot box narrative, that, oh, wait a second, that actually did turn out to be the case. And a lot of these goofs never learn their lesson, so they go from case to case and they just hallucinate that whatever statements are made by police or family early on are gospel and can never be deviated from in any way. And again, that's why a lot of these cases remain unsolved, because you're building a house of cards on a false foundation. On Mindshock, obviously, we don't fall for any of these silly logical fallacies because the truth is unknown until after the case is solved, and it has to be solved definitively, too. Like, for example, in the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders case, just because there's a statement that DNA matches, that doesn't mean it actually matched. That doesn't mean the DNA wasn't planted. I mean, you have to look at the case as a whole. You have to look at all available evidence and information, not just go off of taglines on the idiot box. But a lot of people do that. But anyway, again, that's why Mindshock exists. So just to dissect the statements a little further, obviously, teenagers don't always tell their friends, family members, everything. So what else did Kelsey not tell them? And so that's why in a lot of cases, again, it's not that the family members are not good people being 100% honest with what they know, but again, humans are fallible. It's not that revolutionary of a concept. Humans don't have to be intentionally lying to be saying things they believe to be true that actually aren't true, because they're, of course, the unknown variables, which a lot of goofs just really have a hard time understanding that there are unknown unknowns. So you have your known knowns, your known unknowns, and then you have your unknown unknowns. And in a lot of cases, those unknown variables are the ones that are critical in solving the case. So again, teenagers have secrets, whatever. Usually they're relatively innocuous, but who knows? A lot of these, and again, if they weren't murdered, I mean, there's plenty of people meeting other people online that they shouldn't be. And all that's going on, most of the time, obviously, it doesn't end in murder. But it's really weird to assume that the family would have 100% knowledge, or even law enforcement would have 100% knowledge. There's many unknown variables. So there are a couple of interesting posts, again, on the Libby and Abby subreddit in reference to this. I'm going to go over them. Perry Freeman, a respected former U.S. Marshal and detective investigator, insists it is still definitely tied in somehow on the meth ring angle, as well as local Delphi and surrounding areas in state. He believes the ring could also have lured and catfished Liberty German on social media. Freeman was featured a day or so ago on the Delphi Daughters subreddit, gave about an hour of great info. Now, did the ring have contact with Anthony Shantz? Well, criminal circles often intersect within small-town America. Anything is possible, and only in law enforcement knows. A girl who was catfished by one criminal pedo could obviously also be lured by many other sickos. Just remember that reality, she was out there wide open on the web, and Indiana, it seems, is full of these types. It doesn't mean Anthony Shantz is not relevant or that the transcripts are in any doubt. Keegan-Anthony Klein is still in my top 5. He's just not number 1 due to the local meth ring knowing the Germans. It's too compelling, and the personal connection. I also go back and forth, sometimes Tony Klein and Keegan Klein back at number 1. This week, I'm back to the Kokomo crew. Okay, so basically, there's one investigator who believes that this is connected, of course, to the Gareth Kurtz, Ashley Garth ring, and all those people with direct connections to the Germans, direct connection to Ron Logan's property. I mean, the coincidence stack is a mile high here. So are we going to assume that criminal enterprises don't overlap? I mean, that would be kind of silly. I mean, coincidence theorists do that. They, of course, say, oh, no, that's definitely not related, even though, again, the case is not solved. But yeah, it's really not a stretch in any way to think that criminals know each other. I mean, they clearly do. You have endless examples of criminals in one enterprise overlapping into another because criminals are criminals and they can be engaged in many different types of illegal activity. Other posts here. I definitely take expert advice by people like this to heart. That Perry Freeman also said that the U.S. Marshals are now involved undercover in helping the case. And this is something that actually was admitted by Carter in the episode with Carter. I went over this. He mentioned the U.S. Marshals also. So this is not secret information. So, but why are the U.S. Marshals involved? I mean, again, and how early were they involved? How early was the FBI involved? Because it seems like they were there before the murders investigating something. So there seems to be a lot of possible intersection here with many different crimes. That said, I'm thinking he may have some insider tech knowledge. My opinion, I'm betting this is all tied into drugs and human trafficking in the end. That is what will shock the city and citizens, not the players at the lower level, but that this is much bigger than these crimes alone. And that's a very good point. I mean, pre-Epstein, the coincidence theorists really, I mean, they had some religious fervor in denying the corruption in upper political circles. Post-Epstein, I mean, even the most clueless coincidence theorists might have to take a closer look at some of the corruption going on within so-called political circles and how far-reaching it is. For those that don't know, I mean, they should look up former FBI head Ted Gunderson, who started exposing all of this child and human trafficking by political organizations, by corrupt law enforcement. I mean, this guy was onto this as early as the 1980s. Now, to the goofs out there that want to pretend he's just a random kook, I mean, this guy was, I mean, he was a FBI special agent. He was the head of the Los Angeles FBI. I mean, this guy worked on the Marilyn Monroe cases, the John F. Kennedy cases. I mean, he was an author, a best-selling author, How to Locate Anyone Anywhere Without Leaving Home. I mean, this guy was not hard for money. So, again, to the kooks out there, the coincidence theorist kooks, who say that some of these people that are promoting so-called conspiracy theorists, I mean, mostly just corruption exposés, but they're just doing it for financial gain. This guy already had a ton of money, successful careers. There's no reason for him to pull this 180 and just be, especially this is mostly I don't want to say pre-internet, because the people were using the internet in the 80s, just not that many. It really wasn't popular by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of people didn't even have computers in the 80s, but some people did, and some people did have the internet. But the internet was not so-called mainstream per se. The average person wasn't playing around on the internet in the early mid-80s, but the amount of criticism that he received for doing this, I mean, it's kind of weird to say that he was only in it for the fame and fortune, because he already had a successful career and a lot of money before he made all of this public. See, why would he make it public? Because he was specifically involved, he was directly involved in satanic cult cases. And so because of all of his insider information with the FBI, he knew about these connections. And I'm assuming, again, I didn't know him personally, he just couldn't keep that. His conscience had to have him speak out because he couldn't keep it under wraps. And he put a big target on himself by doing this, because this is a highly credible individual, former FBI head. Again, I mean, this is not some random nobody in their mom's basement. So he's talking about all of these satanic ritual cults. He's talking about members and politicians involved in this all across the U.S. I mean, he made public statements through the 90s about all of these networks of political groups that specifically kidnap children and infants, some of them through actual schools. And he exposed all of this. Of course, the coincidence theorists want to pretend and hallucinate he doesn't even exist and none of this was true. But I mean, this is easily verifiable. Easily verifiable. And a lot of so-called top government officials are involved in all this. So this is all pre-Epstein. And he was blowing the whistle on all of this pre-Epstein. And so, again, is it that hard to believe? I mean, for the Dunning-Kruger crowd, maybe. For those with too severe cognitive dissonance to understand that corruption is real, and wearing costumes or being part of a government law enforcement organization does not magically make someone non-corrupt. I'm not going to hallucinate percentages. I'm not saying most law enforcement are corrupt. It's probably the other way around. Most law enforcement probably are not corrupt. But there's a certain percentage. We're not going to pretend we know what the percentage is. There's a more than zero percentage. Possibly, shockingly more than zero. Possibly double digits, maybe not, but who knows? And again, it's more than zero. So was there some kind of an investigation into human trafficking? Now, human trafficking is not new to Indiana. Again, those who just even have a modicum of logic and sense, you do not need to be an expert at research to look this up. I mean, human trafficking is a very real problem. So, is the Delphi case involved in this? I'm not going to pretend I know. I don't know. But if the FBI were on the ground, if the U.S. Marshals are involved, I mean, clearly there's something weird going on. If Abby and Libby got caught in the middle of it and they're only a small part of it, I mean, obviously it should still be a priority to solve their case and get them justice, but there might be a lot of other missing and murdered people and children that are part of a larger investigation as well. That's definitely a possibility here. Now, obviously, in some of these crime circles, there are people low on the totem pole. So if Keegan Kline and Tony Kline, they're involved in the ring in some capacity, they might not be involved with the murders or even the attempted trafficking. Is this attempted trafficking gone wrong? Were they really taken to a barn where they were killed, as early rumors suggest? Of course, the coincidence theorists, they maintain that's just a rumor, just like the catfishing was just a rumor. But now, all of a sudden, as soon as law enforcement make official statements, all of a sudden it's not a rumor anymore, and they're going to pretend and hallucinate they never discounted it. I mean, coincidence theorists are a goofy bunch, but that's how they operate. So if the early rumors about the barn are true, obviously we do have the thermal imaging drone that did not pick up their bodies. I mean, there's still goofs disputing that. In the comments all the time trying to pretend and hallucinate that, again, the scientific literature doesn't exist regarding 1 to 1.5 degrees per hour with up to 3-hour delay. Before that even happens, I mean, there's just a lot of people out there, they're so their dissonance is so triggered, they have to do all this mental gymnastics to try to make it make sense, to try to make it match the official narrative on the idiot box, because their brain just can't function any other way. They have to have this blind faith in the idiot box and official statements. So if the early rumors are true, in this case, like look at all these other cases that got solved. Oh, it turned out the early rumors were true. Again, I'm not saying that's the case here, but that is the case in certain cases. So if the early rumors are true, it's very possible that they were being catfished. Perhaps they were going to be trafficked and something went wrong and they were killed. Then they were dumped back at the trails. Who knows? Maybe something was planted on the phone or sent into the cloud. Like, some people think that the image of Bridge Guy was planted to kind of distract and divert attention away from the true perpetrators. And if that's true, they did a good job, right? I mean, the case is still unsolved. Again, a lot of these coincidence theorists that just, they can't wrap their brain around it. But if that's what happened, they succeeded. Because everybody's obsessed with the Bridge Guy image. Especially if Bridge Guy, as in those earlier statements, well, I mean, this is police bulletins. I mean, this is not disputable. Bridge Guy was arrested and released. It was somebody else. Now, again, a lot of that terminology is kind of weird. If you haven't listened to the previous Mindshock episodes, make sure you check them out because I go over all of this. I have an episode, Bridge Guy Arrested, because that's what was reported. And that the guy in the original sketch described as Bridge Guy, he was arrested and cleared, no longer a person of interest, and that's why they switched to the younger sketch. I mean, this is police bulletin here. This is not me. I'm just reading what the official police bulletins state. I went over that many times. Yet a lot of these goofs try to pretend that the original sketch is not Bridge Guy. I mean, how many Bridge Guys are there? I mean, if the original sketch is not Bridge Guy, that's fine, but it was reported as Bridge Guy, and Bridge Guy as in the older Bridge Guy sketch, that guy was arrested and cleared according to all of this information from official sources, not me. I am not putting that information forward. I'm repeating it from the law enforcement bulletins. I can't believe I even have to explain that. That should give an idea of how severe the Dunning-Kruger goofs are triggered and how many comments they make about that because they just can't wrap their brains around these very simple concepts. That doesn't mean that the old Bridge Guy sketch was the actual guy in the bridge, although he does kind of look like him, doesn't he? Another interesting statement here, because some people believe that they weren't catfished and all the Anthony shots is a red herring, and they're talking about how that's tormenting the families. So Doug Carter and company are just going to tell the families false information that will torment them. A response here. But in this very article, it discusses the inaccuracies and or misstatements that law enforcement made to the families, or rather to the family singular. It seems one family is much closer to the investigation than the other. I'm assuming the Germans here. And is this poster, alleging that the Williams family were told different? Because that would be interesting if we can verify what law enforcement told to each family at which point in time. Irrespective, this very article references some of law enforcement's false information. Yet you cite this article as an example of law enforcement being forthcoming about the investigation. I don't follow. Okay, after 5 years, countless inaccuracies, misstatements, bombastic press conferences and interviews, I can no longer accept anything in good faith. Okay, so maybe one of these people actually learned something from this case. Being scientifically skeptical is the opposite of being a gullible goof. Because again, humans are fallible. It's just amazing how many people don't understand that basic concept. That doesn't mean they're intentionally lying. That just means that what they're saying might not be true. They might be mistaken. It's really not that revolutionary that humans are fallible. All right, let's get to more mind-shocking points here in the timeline. Also on the Libby and Abby subreddit, they make a reference here. Law enforcement made a very specific statement that has me wondering something for quite a while. Doug Carter asked, or rather Riley, it's edited, Riley asked this, if anyone saw an individual on Hoosier Heartland Highway leaving a duffel bag on the side of the road. Wanted to get more thoughts on this question statement by Carter, and this is why. There are witnesses, plural, who reported seeing Bridge Guy after 3 p.m., which would have been after the murders as we know. Again, as we don't know, but this person is saying as we know. We know at least one, or at least after the, well, we actually don't know what time the abduction would have taken place either. We know at least one of these witnesses are verified as seeing Bridge Guy because she described his clothing before the Bridge Guy video was released. Interesting here. And then also we do have Doug Carter stating that no one saw Bridge Guy. So again, conflicting statements from law enforcement all around. Given the severity of the injuries to the girls, he would have been bloody in the bottom of pants wet. Neither was reported. I believe Bridge Guy had a change of clothes under his baggy clothing before making his way back out of the woods near Freedom Bridge where the car was parked at the old CPS building. Law enforcement asking for this specific tip is very telling in my opinion. They asked if anyone saw a man with a duffel bag leaving a duffel bag on the side of the road. I believe they mentioned Hoosier Heartland Highway specifically. They either A, have found the duffel bag with the bloody clothes and are leaving that out as it is something only the killer would know, or B, are making an assumption based on what we do know, which is the killer had to have been very bloody and the witness saw him not bloody or wet, so assuming there has to be ditched clothing somewhere. I would lean towards A, law enforcement has the duffel bag, because that's a pretty specific thing to ask and assume. Unless a witness also saw a duffel bag, in which case that wouldn't necessarily be an assumption. The killer could have very well left clothing in the woods or buried them somewhere in between. So asking the specific question about someone seeing a person leaving a duffel bag on the side of the road would point at law enforcement having said bag with clothing. This could very well be where they obtained a hair, partial print, partial DNA profile, etc. Carter stating you made mistakes also seems to point to this. I mean, there's a problem in chain of custody there, because how would anyone prove that that duffel bag belonged to a particular person, even if the duffel bag had whatever DNA in it? If they do not have a duffel bag, why would they ask if anyone saw someone leave a duffel bag or carrying a duffel bag and potentially leaving a bag at the side of the road? Well, again, if a witness saw that. Does law enforcement have this duffel bag with bloody clothing? Is this where they obtained a partial print and or partial DNA profile hair because they collected hair samples from at least Keegan Kline we know? Okay. Wow. So apparently some responses here. The witness to Bridge Guy's outfit described before any public images were released saw him at around 1:30 p.m. before the crime. And again, is this the guy who possibly did not murder them? Is this the individual that was the sex offender that was cleared of this crime? And even if he was cleared, does that mean he's not guilty, though? I mean, there's a lot of wrinkles here. More posts here. There's some confusion here. Is this the guy that was spotted on the side of the road? The same guy who had the broken down vehicle, who gave the lady the creeps and said he was waiting for his dad? And didn't that happen at 8 p.m. at night? I'm pretty sure law enforcement got that guy and it was just a coincidence. And 8 at night doesn't add up to either. Bridge Guy was probably long gone by 4:30 at the latest. If the lady spotted him before, where was the spotting and why was he considered suspicious? Questions we'll probably know the answers to. In my opinion, the later day sighting is up in the air as to whether or not that person is Bridge Guy. At 1:30 p.m., teen girl witness sighting near the Freedom Bridge is more reliable. She described this man and his clothing, that which was worn in the video Libby took before images were released to the public. So 2 points there. One, the girls could have, I talk about this all the time, they could have filmed him or not filmed him. He's in the background. He's just a weird creeper guy. He's not who killed them. And possibly not even the source of the audio of the Down the Hill audio. Or maybe if he is Down the Hill audio, that still doesn't mean he's the killer, because we don't know what happened after that or how many other people were involved there. But let's say if he's not the audio, he's just some guy that was in the background of their Snapchat, and he is who this witness saw, but he's not the killer, and possibly the guy in the original sketch, old Bridge Guy sketch, possibly the guy that law enforcement cleared. In which case, none of this is helpful. And another poster with a brain actually said this: we don't know what any witness said. I mean, it's true. We don't know what they said to law enforcement. We weren't there for those conversations. And anyone who hallucinates otherwise is simply just hallucinating. So the original poster said this: one witness reported his clothing before the video was released. Another witness reported his clothing after the murders and before the video came out. So both before the video came out, around 3 p.m., 3:10 p.m., coming from the woods up by Freedom Bridge and the CPS building. There was a timeline posted. Okay. 3 to 3:10 p.m. strikes me because Toby has gone on record to say it was all over by 3:30. Definitely room for interpretation there. Was the killer leaving the scene at the time, or was that when the victims passed? This leads me to wonder, what was 3-ish guy wearing? Because if these are different guys wearing different things, I mean, that's also interesting. Or if he's wearing the same clothing as before the alleged murders took place at the alleged time. If it was before and after and his clothing is pristine, that would point to him not being involved. Or not being directly involved. Perhaps he could have been at the scene and then he left and the other people were the ones that killed them and got bloody, or simply taken them elsewhere. If they were abducted from the scene, taken elsewhere for the night, or for however many hours before they were brought back, this guy could have been involved, and he would have had clean clothes before and after because there was no murder at that time. This is the theory here. The theory is Bridge Guy had 2 pairs of jeans and tops. We know he has at least a blue jacket and a hoodie. Again, we don't know that. That's the guy in the video who may or may not be responsible. Bridge Guy commits murders, leaves the scene traveling through the woods northwest, removes the bloody jeans with another pair on underneath, as well as removing the top jacket and possibly even hoodie that's on underneath, which leaves him in blue jeans and a dark colored top. Can't say if it was blue, black, but fits the description of what was seen by the other witnesses just prior to the murders. This witness was a decent distance away. If you look at the map, you will better understand, as she was on the south side of Freedom Bridge and saw a man wearing blue jeans and a dark top, but no hoodie on at that time. You know, how hard is it to wear 2 pairs of jeans? I mean, I've never tried that, but I would imagine due to jeans being thicker, I mean, obviously you could wear, you know, maybe some thin pants, workout type pants, and then jeans on top, maybe even like tight fitting sweats and then loose jeans on top. Has anyone ever tried to wear 2 pairs of jeans? How easy is that? Very important points here. We don't know any descriptions given by a witness. Exactly. And the rumors that appeared in 2017 describing Bridge Guy were about old Bridge Guy. Officially and in writing, young Bridge Guy and old Bridge Guy are not the same person. Carter made a fuss during the interviews. In my opinion, this can't be a mistake. They found that they are not the same person. If it were otherwise, they would have not confirmed this information again in the days following the conference. Other posts here. I never understood the could be a mix of both sketches quote. You think that was said just in case the sketches came up in a trial? I mean, that wouldn't matter, would it? I mean, how would that matter? Because if they need DNA evidence, I mean, nobody's going to be convicted on some vague sketches. Another post here. I heard a rumor that most law enforcement investigators believe the killer is young Bridge Guy sketch, and believe that the young sketch is the correct sketch. Apparently, Carter still thought it is a shame to abandon the old sketch, which is why he said the killer might look like their combination. Please note that he only said that in an interview in the days following the conference. For me, it is a bit incomprehensible because all the agencies involved reminded about it once more after the conference, and I think it is very important to them because the information contained only in one sentence, young Bridge Guy sketch and old Bridge Guy sketch are not the same person. Treat part of the comment about Carter as a rumor. Another response here, both the task force and FBI firmly believe the young Bridge Guy sketch represents the man on the bridge who was responsible for the killings. On March 16th, 2022, Indiana State Police, again through the local media, issued the following statement below, asking the public to focus on the second sketch. The second sketch is a depiction of the man on the bridge who was responsible for the killings. And that's weird. Like, why do they so firmly believe that the guy in the young guy sketch is the same guy in the video? Because what if it's a different guy? March 16, 2022, investigators would like the public to focus on the photo of the man on the bridge, the voice recording, and the second sketch that was released by law enforcement. Carter has mentioned in past interviews and as recently as the 5-year anniversary that he believes the culprit will likely be a combination of both sketches. If so, I think Carter believes witnesses of both sketches attempted to describe the same man. It's possible one of the witnesses saw the man with a scarf because the old Bridge Guy sketch is clearly missing the highly identifiable, memorable, elongated chin. The old Bridge Guy sketch might also have been influenced by the early interpretation of the video too. Both sketches do have the hooded eyes though. I believe the young Bridge Guy sketch is the killer and has the following distinguishing characteristics as depicted in the young Bridge Guy sketch: curly wavy hair, high forehead, hooded eyes, and elongated chin. The sketch is a resemblance or ballpark estimation, not a photograph. If I had to bring one trait over from the old Bridge Guy sketch, it would be the larger, more pronounced nose. Also believe young Bridge Guy has a penchant for short-brimmed caps of a couple types, as does his family, just my own opinion. Another post here. One possibility is the sketches are Tony Klein and Keegan Klein. I don't necessarily think this, but the sketches being of two people that are closely related is one possible explanation for the mix of the two statements. Another is that maybe too many witnesses contributed to the Old Bridge Guy sketch. Perhaps they believe certain elements of Old Bridge Guy, eyes, nose, whatever, were accurate, but others may not be. I guess this could be the case if investigators believe that the witnesses for the Young Bridge Guy sketch saw the same man as a witness that helped with the Old Bridge Guy sketch. I mean, that's a good point, too. I mean, which witnesses saw who? I mean, this is all conjecture at this point. I don't know if this was ever confirmed anywhere or if it's just a rumor, but I've read that the sketch artist for Old Bridge Guy might have filled in the blanks from the witness descriptions using the Bridge Guy video. It's also possible that the witnesses for Old Bridge Guy sketch may have had their memories warped if they saw stills from the Bridge Guy video prior to their meeting with the sketch artist. And again, we actually don't know any of that information, so... I mean, an interesting point about the duffel bag, though, because if they have DNA or a mix of DNA, but they can't prove that whoever had that duffel bag was connected to the location of the alleged murder scene. Because how would, if there was some kind of an abandoned bag and it had a mix of DNA on it, or maybe they know who was carrying the bag at some point, but it doesn't match the DNA in the bag. I mean, there's so many unknown variables here. Or if they don't have Libby or Abby's DNA in the bag, but they have the other guy's DNA in the bag, and they can't link the bag to the crime scene, even though they believe that the murderer was carrying that bag. Also, what's interesting is that there was a backpack involved again. So this is curious here. Here's an article, February 20th, 2017. Wow, early on. Teens killed, police look beyond Delphi for suspect by Ron Wilkins, jconline.com. Police are not limiting the search for a killer to just Carroll County. We're just expanding our search to anybody who saw anything, Indiana State Police Kim Riley said, explaining that at the time it might not have seemed suspicious at the time. What? More specifically, police want to know if anyone recalls a hitchhiker along the Hoosier Heartland Highway, a person walking along a county road or highway, Riley said. We don't know if the person's a local or a drifter who came in and left, Riley said, as he explained that they were looking for what they were looking for as they look to nearby community for tips. We want to look at any aspect of what somebody might have seen, Riley said, adding that if someone saw a person throwing away a backpack, they'd be interested in tracking that down too. So, did he just say that as an example, as a general example? Not that they were specifically looking for a backpack. So, some people believe that Brad Heath is this witness. I'd love to know what Brad Heath saw. Possibly he happened to see someone with a backpack acting suspiciously, and that's one of the things he reported to law enforcement. Also, someone posted here that a bolo text was sent to locals about a backpack in the first couple days. Wow, that's interesting. And so this was all sent out in the days after and then never mentioned ever again anywhere, which is quite weird. Here's a great post here, also on the Libby and Abby subreddit by Cheeky Yank. We don't know for sure, but there are local rumors and Facebook posts about a necklace. The backpack is something I heard early on and have seen it referenced in other places. The money is the most interesting thing to me if it were there and taken. But let me actually read the original post here. This was 9 months ago by Cheeky Yank, Signatures and Rumors. There's a lot of gossip about the bizarre crime scene and signatures. We have discussed a lot of items that were possibly left by the killer. But it is possible that one or more signatures wasn't something that was left, but rather something that was taken. There was a lot more physical evidence than that at the crime scene, I've said, and it's probably not what you would imagine or what people would think I'm talking about. Items thought to have been left by the killer. I'm guessing these are, again, just guesses. A knife, an upside-down cross, dolls or stuffed animals, a sheet with a smiley face, possible writing somewhere at the crime scene, R, the letter U, and the word up, all in capital letters. R-U up, period. Okay, that's weird. Items possibly taken by the killer: Abby's backpack, Abby's necklace or jewelry, approximately $15 to $20, a small amount of hair taken from each victim, and a shoe. I'm guessing they only found one of Libby's shoes then. There has also been talk that Libby's phone was one of the items taken. Also, that it and other things were possibly disposed of in a gravel pit or a pond on the Mears property. In my opinion, this is a significant enough case that law enforcement would have been able to get a warrant to drain the pond if they thought something was there. Or did they possibly recover things from the pond and just simply not reveal that to the public? If I was a criminal in that area, the only place I would dispose of evidence is Lake Siccot. Anywhere else would be dumb. Thoughts on signatures taken or left? So that's just in reference. So here's the follow-up post here. So the backpack is something I heard early on. I had seen it referenced in other places. The money is the most interesting thing to me if it was there and taken. That is usually not something that is taken on a SK type of murder. Someone would have to rifle through a bag or pockets, possibly leaving evidence behind. If this was a serial killer, his goal was psychological, emotional, and physical. He wasn't looking for $15. I think a second person who didn't have the same goal as the killer, without gloves, touched the bag and took the money. If the money was missing from the crime scene, I think we can bank on 2 or more people being there, in my opinion. Now, here is an excellent point that we have not talked about. If someone else was at the murder scene, or again, regardless whether they were killed in a barn somewhere and then brought back, whatever the case may be, if someone touched the bodies and contaminated evidence who is not the killer after the fact, I mean, what does that mean for law enforcement? Especially, like, let's say the DNA is at the crime scene, but the person had an alibi for the critical hours. So how would that explain his DNA being at the scene when he was clearly somewhere else until whatever, let's say 4 p.m. or even 5 p.m.? Or even, let's say, that whole day, because the bodies were discovered officially the following morning, between 11 a.m. and noon or whatever. Did he have an alibi for all of the previous day, but not that morning? So law enforcement somehow knows that he's not responsible for the killing, but his DNA is on the bodies. Is that part of the reason that the case is unsolved? Now, I don't know if these are locals or whoever commenting here, but a couple more comments. Early on, like the 14th or 15th, there was a notice sent out asking if anyone had found a knapsack on the side of the road. However, we have no idea if that knapsack belonged to the girls or bridge guy, or if it had anything to do with this case at all. Nobody has ever referenced Abby or Libby with a backpack, not law enforcement, the Patties, Kelsey, or Anna. The notice about the knapsack is interesting. How did they send it out? Via cell phone alert or local news? Response here. It came through the phone as a text alert. They didn't mention the murders or what it was in reference to, but the local news report did. Okay, and that's the article I just read. So law enforcement was interested in a backpack. So some people believe that Brad Heath may have been the witness to the backpack. I don't know why specifically the backpack, but let's go over Brad Heath. So there are images of him putting up flyers, and he sounded an animal horn on the bridge. Here's an article, WTHR.com. As tips pour in, some in Delphi turn to faith. As police expand their search nationwide for whoever killed the 2 Delphi teenagers, some in the community are leaning on their faith. By David McAnally, February 23rd, 2017. On the trail Thursday, we saw Brad Heath, a man of faith, sounding a horn of animal bone. Heath says a message from God brought him to the bridge to blow the shofar, signaling God is fighting for his people. The people of Delphi need the Lord to fight for us in this time, this trying time, Heath said. Heath said he was working near the trail the day the girls died, allegedly that day. I had no idea. I was not far from it, so it's bothered me. There's some things I passed along I will hope will help the investigation. Let me reread that last part again. There's some things I passed along I hope will help the investigation. Why would he make such a statement if he doesn't know anything that could help at all? I mean, he has to know something that at least could possibly help. Like, for example, if he did see a suspicious guy with a backpack, he might not know it's directly related to the case, but he still report it because it's potentially related. So clearly there's something that's potentially related that he felt the need to pass along. Now let's examine Brad Heath. There's a post about him 2 years ago, also on the Libyan Abbey subreddit. Brad Heath as a possible witness. Brad Heath is the gentleman who would put flyers regarding the crime in his packages sent out through, I believe, eBay activity. He is also the gentleman who blew the animal horn on Freedom Bridge that news outlets had picked up on. Per his statement to reporters, he was working in the trail area the day of the crime and gave some info to law enforcement that he hoped would be helpful. As far as I can tell, Heath is a mole exterminator. Most of the properties in the trail area that are north of Monon Bridge appear to be agricultural. The properties on the south side, however, seem to be residential with newer homes and large yards. I could see these properties lending themselves to needing mole exterminators to keep their lawns and property looking nice. Would this info lend any more credence to crime activity initiating at the south end of the bridge? I would appreciate any thoughts. That's a good point, too, because if drug dealers or meth heads or whoever, as some allege, are involved in this case, or at least involved in crime in the area, somewhere around the bridge, supposedly it's a hangout for teens, possibly a drug hangout, possibly drug members also involved in meth in that area. Again, we've gone over a lot of those stories. And then, of course, no one knows exactly which property he was on. It simply says near the area. So, some people, again, believe that Heath was the one that passed the info about the backpack on. Another post here. It makes me wonder if one of the witnesses saw him wearing a backpack or dropping one off. Maybe that's what Brad Heath saw, someone ditching a bag. An interesting post here also. Seems like it could be a good piece of the puzzle later down the road at a trial. For example, can you identify the person you saw throwing this backpack away at X time on Y Highway, Mr. or Mrs. Witness? Is that person in the courtroom today? Followed by, yes, he is, but he looks nothing like either sketch. Reading the article again brings back several of the questions surrounding the statement. Do they have this backpack that was tossed? And hoping to find a witness who can positively identify the person they saw throw the said backpack they have recovered. I'm just finding it hard to believe law enforcement would make this specific statement about a backpack if they did not have a backpack in the first place. Or possibly a witness. But if the backpack, let's say the backpack does have the DNA of both Abby and Libby and another party that they believe is the killer. But that DNA does not match anyone in the system. So now what? And there's not necessarily a specific chain of custody there. And how many people were even involved? Another interesting post here. Let's say the killer did leave a duffel bag. And I don't think it's a guarantee the killer would know law enforcement had found it if they did. The fact that they're asking about it leads me to believe they haven't found it if it exists, but they would like to. I feel that's why they would be asking for witnesses who might have seen it, so they can find out the precise location and possibly discover the duffel bag, also to see if they can ID Bridge Guy, but I'm sure their memory is pretty hazy at this point. Any potential witnesses might not even remember what they had seen, as I certainly wouldn't remember a guy with a bag on the side of the road years ago. But also, is it because this was all mentioned early on and never again, did law enforcement recover the bag? And that's why everything stopped about the bags and the backpacks, because they already had them and they didn't want to, I don't know, for whatever reason. Well, they would no longer need the public's help in getting them if they already had them. Or possibly they already identified, someone came forward and they identified that person. So they have all the information they could possibly have regarding the duffel bag and or backpack, so they no longer need any. And again, that would still leave us, I mean, all of this is unknown, of course. Another post here. I agree, law enforcement asking this specific question has to mean one of only a couple options. Both are intriguing. Because law enforcement is not going to ask about a backpack randomly if they do not believe there to be a backpack involved. One, they have found a bag that is connected to the murders and hoping to find a witness who can possibly identify the individual that left it. That would be a direct connection to murders, as good as seeing the killer kill. Then, since identifying the person who left it is identifying the person responsible for their murders. Not really. I mean, that's not really beyond a reasonable doubt, but still, obviously, very helpful. 2, they believe they're just to be a bag of some sorts because of the knowledge they have about the scene, murders, and the totality of evidence as a whole. So, again, a lot of questions here in the Delphi case. A lot of things that don't make any sense. And again, I mean, some people really believe this is a serial killer. In which case, again, is a serial killer connected to the Anthony Shots account? Now, if we're not falling for black and white fallacies, how many people get catfished on a daily basis? I mean, not by a murder or anything, just catfished, I don't want to say innocently, but perhaps, I mean, if these are adults preying on underage children, I mean, obviously they're scummy, but scummy people aren't always violent criminals. They don't always want to kill or assault somebody. Some of them just want to screw around and in whatever, mostly digital. Or maybe they do want to meet them, but they wouldn't cross the line into physical assault. There's all kinds of weirdos and criminals out there. So let's not pretend and hallucinate they all fit in one neat box. So a guy like Klein, is he a violent offender, or is he just this online predator that maybe does want to meet people in real life, but would never cross the line into physical violent assault? I mean, I don't know, but is it possible one of those types of criminals, either Tony Klein or Keegan Klein, are attempting to do this to these girls, or at least to Liberty, and there's also a serial killer on the prowl at the same time, and the serial killer commits this act, or human traffickers or whatever not connected to the Kleins? Or if they are connected to the Kleins, they never informed the Kleins they would be doing this. And the Kleins would be way too scared to blow the whistle on these people if these are some big hitter criminals. So again, let's not fall for black and white logical fallacies. I mean, theoretically, it's possible the catfish was going on and possibly might not have involved, the true murderers might not be the people involved in the catfish that was actively going on at this time. So, yes, I mean, a lot of variables in this case. So we actually have plenty more to cover even. I do want to continue looking at some of the earlier rumors, because in so many cases, some of the earlier rumors do turn out to be true. So to write them off cluelessly and pretend and hallucinate they're definitely not true, that's obviously not conducive to solving cases. So I hope you guys found another edition of Mindshock True Crime interesting and informative, where we go over every theory, leaving no stone unturned in typical Mindshock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share this podcast. Keep up awareness in this case and other cases. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topological analysis, co-podcast requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.